Today we're going to learn Baba Batra Daf Mem Tet. This is the Daf for Tisha B'Av. As I mentioned in class, there's a custom not to learn on Tisha B'Av. This year we get a little bit lucky because it's a really short daf, so it's easy to make up either before or after. With that, we're going to get started. So we're starting with the very bottom or toward the bottom of Mem Chet of a bit. We had a story of Tabi who hung Papi on a tree and basically forced him to sell him land or something. So Rabbi Bar Bar Chana signs on, both with another witness, presumably, on the document that says, signed, right? That Papi sold this land to Tabi, and also signed on a moda'ah, which basically said that Papi says, I was forced to do this, and the witnesses say, we heard Papi say he was forced to do this. He doesn't really mean to buy it, in which case Rav Huna said, because he wrote the moda'ah, again, we had to figure out what Rav Huna meant, but the Gemara basically read, Rav Huna is saying, if he hadn't written the moda'ah, then the shtar would have been good. But because these witnesses also signed on a moda'ah, that proves that the sale was done under duress, and therefore it's not a valid sale. Had he not written the moda'ah, or the witnesses hadn't written and signed the moda'ah, then we don't care if it was under duress, because even a sale under duress is a sale, as Rav Huna had been known to say. Now, the Gemara is going to say, wait a minute. Is this really true that witnesses who signed a moda'ah and also signed the shtar can basically say, hey, this was done under duress and it's not a valid sale, and cancel the sale? Didn't Rav Nachman say, Hama Rav Nachman, last line of Daf Mem Chet, ha'edim she'amru amanah hayu dvareinu ein emanim, moda'ah hayu dvareinu ein emanim. These are two different cases. If witnesses are signed on a sale document, and then they come and say, either, okay, let's start with the second one. They come and say, there was a moda'ah here, meaning the person who sold it made a statement to us that he did it under duress. Okay, we don't believe them, okay, which is basically our case. So why would we believe the witnesses when it's the same witnesses, right? And they claim when they signed on that document, the document of sale was done under duress. Why are they believed? That's the big question. But while we're here, we're going to learn about amanim. Amanah hayu dvareinu is something else. This is usually done in a loan. Let's say I go to you and beg you to lend me money. And I say, listen, I really want the money so badly. I'm willing. You haven't even given me the money yet. I'm willing to write a document, an IOU, and give it to you. And I trust you're not going to collect it until you give me the money, you loan me the money. But I'm going to give, that's why it's called a shtar amanah. I trust you. I'll give it to you now. Okay, even though I know that if you have a shtar in your hand, you could theoretically collect money from me, even though there hasn't even been a loan. But I'm willing to do that. And we sign witnesses, even though everybody knows full well that there hasn't been a loan yet. Now, witnesses are not allowed to sign on that kind of document. It's an illegal document. It's really illegal for one major reason. The major reason it's illegal is because even, let's say, we write it on January 1st, and on February 1st, you actually loan me the money. Well, any land you sold between January 1st and February 1st is not lien to the loan, because lien property is only, any property I sold as the borrower is not going to be lien to this loan between January and February. It's only once the loan takes place in February. And that means anyone who bought land between January and February, they don't even know I have the shtar, because it wasn't a real shtar yet. It wasn't effective. And they'll think that they're buying it and it's not lien. But it turns out if you go to collect the money from me and I don't have money, you'll say, oh, look, the date is January 1st. Even though now the loan did happen, but the loan only happened on February 1st, and therefore only land that I still had in my possession on February 1st, which does not include this land. And you can go collect it against the law. So it's an illegal document because it's going to lead to problems and things that are not lawful. So if witnesses say, oh yeah, it's true. Like, let's say you go to collect money from me and I say there was never a loan, or you go to collect from property of other people and they're like, what are you talking about? This wasn't lien to this loan. And then you go find the witnesses, right? The court finds the witnesses come and testify, and they say, oh yeah, it was the shtar amanah. This never really happened. We don't believe them, okay? Their testimony saying it was an amanah is not believed, and actually the Malbim can get all the money back, okay? Why is that? Well, right now we don't really know, but in a minute we're going to see, and then later we'll see another reason. But so now the problem is, real issue, let's move off of amanah. This statement of Rav Nachman says, a moda'ah, if the witnesses say, oh, this was done under duress, we don't believe them. Okay, now, we just said, Rav Huna said that because Rabbi Bar Bar Chana was signed on the moda'ah, that overrides the bill of sale. Which right now it says that wouldn't work. So very simply, the Gemara answers, Hanimile al peh. When we said, if you say it was a sharmana or you say it was a moda'at, that's all you're saying it Baal Peh. Okay, you're saying, right? The sharmana, there is only one star. And basically, you're saying that star, the witnesses come and orally testify that was an amanah. In this case, they're apparently orally saying, oh yeah, he told us it was done under duress. That's not strong enough to override a star. Okay? De lo ate al peh umar the star. Oral testimony of a witness can't undo a signed document. Aval b'shtara. But if they had a signed moda'ah, and some people say it doesn't even matter if the moda'ah was signed after the sale or before the sale. Some people think it has to be signed before the sale. But a shtar, ate shtar, mara l'shtar. In this case, Rabbi Baruch Chana, in our case, had signed on a shtar and signed on a moda'ah. If you have a shtar against a shtar, it can override it. But the word of the witnesses against a written document is not strong enough. That's Rav Nachman's approach. Now we're going to go back and just reread Rav Nachman, do a gufa. Let's go back. Okay, we brought Rav Nachman just to contradict Rav Huna. We resolved the contradiction because one was talking about a moda'ah oral one, and the other was talking about a written one. But now we're going to go back and show that there is an opinion that disagrees with Rav Nachman. Amar Rav Nachman, right? Neither way are the witnesses believed when they testify orally. But Mar bar Rav Ashi Amar, amanayu dvareinu ein nemanim, moda'ayu dvareinu nemanim. If you say amanayu dvareinu, we're not going to believe you. But if you say moda'ayu dvareinu, then you will be believed. Because what's the reason? My timer. There's a big difference between witnesses signing on a real valid sale document, but claiming that it was done under duress. We'll believe the witnesses because it's their testimony they signed and they're testifying orally. It doesn't really make a difference. Oral testimony can override a document if they give it a good explanation. But in a shtar mana, if they signed on this document, remember, a shtar mana should never have been written. That's what the Gemara says here. Lo nitan likatev. This was never meant to be written. It's forbidden to write it. Now, if witnesses come and say, listen, we signed on a document that should never have been written because they want to undermine the document, they're basically, this is what we call ein adam mesim atzmo rasha. A person doesn't testify about oneself that they did something wrong. Okay? We don't believe people who come and incriminate themselves in court. So if you come and say, which in a way that affects other people, if you come and say, like you can admit that you did something wrong and pay the price for it. But here the witnesses are saying, we signed a document that we shouldn't have. They're making themselves to be bad people to basically create a loss for one of the sides because they're basically saying, this wasn't a real document. There never was a loan and therefore the Malva can't get their money back. We don't believe that people would ever make themselves look bad and testify negatively about themselves. And therefore, we don't accept this. So that's why a shtar amanah, if you come and testify, oh yeah, it was just an amanah, we don't believe you. Okay, so because there's no way you would come forward and basically say, I did something wrong. So that's Mar bar Rav Ashi disagrees about the moda'ah, but agrees about the shtar amanah, but for a different reason. It's not because oral can't override document. It's because it was okay. You can write a moda'ah, and therefore you can also just say there was a moda'ah and be believed, just like you could have written it. But since you can't write a real shtar amanah, it's forbidden, we don't believe you when you say I did it because you're making yourself to be a bad guy. Okay, now we're done with that section. We're now moving back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah on Daf Mebet and Mebet had said, all kinds of people who can't create a chazaka, a man can't create a chazaka with his wife's property. Now remember, wife, let's assume we're talking about nichse malog. Wife brings in heirloom type property she inherited, all that kinds of things like that, into the marriage. The husband gets to benefit from them while they're married. If this could either happen before they're married or it could be anything she inherits while they're married. If she gets or gifts she gets, the husband has rights to eat all the produce and she gets to keep the land itself, which means that when the husband dies or divorces her, she gets the land back as is. Now, why do you need to say you can't create a chazaka? What would be a chazaka? I ate all the produce. I took all the produce for 3 years. Of course, you can't create a chazaka, right? Pshita, the Gemara says, obviously, kevandi leila pere, he has all the rights to all the produce. So, perihu de ka'achil. So he's eating the produce as his rights as the husband of this woman in her property. So of course it's her property, and of course he can't create a chazaka. There's no chiddush there. The Mishnah doesn't need to tell you something totally, utterly obvious. To which the Gemara says, fine. So what must be the case of the Mishnah? Lo tzricha must be in a case de katabla din udvarim ein lebenichsayayich. He writes down, I don't want to have anything to do with your possessions. And then, even then, the Mishnah is teaching you, if he eats the produce for 3 years and she doesn't protest, it's not his, because we assume, even though we said, I don't want to have anything to do with your produce, and basically disowned or took away all of his rights and said, I'm mochel, I don't want my rights anymore, I'm giving up on them. And yet he eats the produce for 3 years. Why didn't she complain? Because it's her husband. She doesn't care that he eats the produce. And in that case, you might have thought maybe he can create a chazaka because he doesn't have rights to the payroll. But no, he can't because they're husband and wife. So now the Gemara is going to go off on a bit of a problem with this answer. If he wrote to her down, I don't want to have anything to do with your nechsim elog. That doesn't mean he doesn't have anything to do with your nechsim elog. Because v'hatanya, ha'omer l'chavero dinu dvarim ein li al sadeh zo ve'ein li yasek ba v'yadim mesuleket mimena lo amar klum. We've learned this already. If a partner, let's say we're partners in a field, and I say, I don't want to have anything to do with this field, or my hands are removed from this field, or some sort of word of basically saying, I don't want to deal with it, that doesn't mean anything. You don't have rights to the whole field right now. I still have my share. Why? What's missing? All I said was I'm removing myself. I didn't say I'm giving you rights to this. And the concern is that perhaps I just got annoyed one day and said, yeah, I don't want to deal with this anymore. It doesn't really mean I'm giving up my rights to it without getting anything in return. That would be ridiculous. I'm just getting frustrated and I just say that, but I don't really mean it. And unless I do, I use wording that basically makes it clear that I'm giving over my ownership rights to you, since I already owned it, I can't just do that with the words, I'm removing myself from the picture. So therefore, even if the husband had said that and then tried to create a chazaka, which is what we thought the case was all about, it's a meaningless statement. So it wouldn't really matter. The husband still has all the rights in the nechsim elog, and of course he can't create a chazaka, and we're back to square one because it doesn't do anything. So the answer, Amr Debei Rabbi Yana, matnitim b'kotevla ve'oda avusa. We're not talking about a case where the Mishnah is talking about a case where they were only engaged, betrothed in the halachic terms. When they're betrothed, he doesn't have any rights to the nechsim elog. Once he has rights to the nechsim elog, he's treated like a partner. There's already rights. Unless you give over the rights to the other person, he can't get out of it. However, if he hadn't yet gotten the rights to property, and he said, listen, it's very nice you want to pass me your nechsim elog, and I'm supposed to by the rabbi's, takana, which we'll talk about soon. But I'm not interested. Okay, I just don't want them. Then you could say that, and they were never his yet to begin with. So that's already a different story. And how do we know that that's a different story? And then that would be what the Mishnah is talking about. If when they were betrothed, he said, I don't want to have anything to do with it, and then he ate payroll while they were married for 3 years and she didn't protest, that's when the Mishnah is teaching you, even though you would think he could claim it's his own land, we don't accept that claim. Because we assume the woman didn't protest because they're husband and wife. Now, how do we know that you could, when they're only betrothed, you could just say those words and it works? Uchid Rav Kahana, as Rav Kahana says, and now we're turning to Amabet. To Amar Rav Kahana, as Rav Kahana said, Nachala haba lo la'adam mimakom acher, adam matneh aleha shelo yirashena. If land comes to someone from somewhere else, a person could say thanks, but no thanks. I don't want it. Okay. However, there's going to be a bit of a limitation to this law according to Rava. Uchid Rava, we're a bit off tangent now because we've already gotten our answer. We've gotten our answer, which is the Mishnah is a case where they're betrothed and the husband says, I don't want to take your nechsim elog. And that works. Nechsim elog are not his. He doesn't have rights to the payroll. If he eats the payroll for 3 years and doesn't protest, because they're husband and wife, we assume she didn't protest for that reason. And therefore, he can't claim ownership rights. Now, this law that you could just, before they even get to you, you could say, I don't want to have anything to do with them, works only in certain cases. Kid Rava, Da'amar Rava, it's a case where somebody says, I don't want this right that comes to me through a takana that the rabbis instituted, like this one. In a second, we're going to see what he's referring to, what like this one is. Shomi in lo, we accept this. So if somebody says, someone has rights to something, not by Torah law, but somebody has rights to something because the rabbis gave the person rights to it, then the person could just simply say, I just don't want it. And that's fine. And then they won't get it. And that's what we're referring to here, where he doesn't want the nichsei malog. The nichsei malog is a takana of the rabbis, because the rabbis instituted that a husband has to commit that if his wife gets taken into captivity, he will redeem her. And in, in place of that, or parallel to that, she therefore gives up her rights to nichsei malog, and he gets the produce of that while they're married. Okay, it's one for one, basically. She'll commit to this, and therefore he'll commit to that, or he'll commit to that, and therefore she'll commit to this. But if neither one wants, they say, he says, it's really, she has to just say, right, I don't want you to commit to redeem me, it's fine. Then he can give up her rights, or the truth is, I guess it can work either way. Either which one of them can say, I don't want your nichsei malog, and then therefore I don't have to redeem you if you get taken into captivity. Now, he might hopefully want to anyway, but he doesn't have to put up the money for it. Now, Rava had said, if anyone says, I can't, right, I'm not interested in this takanat chachamim that's really done to my benefit, like this, then we listen. What is like this? Ma'ike gonzo. Kidi Rav Huna amar Rav, like Rav Huna said in the name of Rav. De amar Rav Huna amar Rav, as Rav Huna said in the name of Rav. Yechola isha shetomar leba'ala eini nizona ve'eini osa. There's all these things that, in place of this, right, the wife gives up this, or the wife gets this, and in place of that gives this. So the wife gets mizono. The husband has to support the wife and give her food. In exchange for that, she gives her all her salary. Okay, there's a whole question we talked about in Ketubah, but I'm not going to get into now. What about Hadaf if she makes a lot more? It's a different story, but basically her salary goes to cover her food, okay? He gives her food, she gives him salary. But if a woman doesn't want that, she can say to her husband, Eini nizona ve'eini osa. I don't want to take your food, and I want to keep my own money as my own salary. So I'm going to live in, right, I'm going to support myself independently when it comes to food, but I'm going to keep all my salary. She can do that. So that's what we're basically saying, that someone could say, I'm not interested in accepting something before it gets to their hands. And that's in the category of takanot chachamim. And that would explain our Mishnah. Again, this was all to just explain that our Mishnah is talking about a case where the husband, while they were betrothed, said, I don't want your nichsei malog. And then he eats on the property anyway. He eats all the payroll. She doesn't protest. We assume she's not protesting just because they're husband and wife, but not because she gave him rights. And therefore, if he tried to claim I bought it from her, he's not believed. Now that leads us to the next line, which is, well, he's not believed if he has a chazaka, right, where he ate 3 years without her protesting. But hara'aya yesh. But if it sounds like if he pulled out a star that says she sold me her nichsei malog, then it would be valid. But why? We have another problem with this, and this connects with the Mishnah we learned in Gittin. Tema nachat ruach hasiti leba'ali. Why can't she just claim, oh, I only did it because I wanted to make my husband happy, okay, which could mean all sorts of things. It could mean, shalom bayit. He wanted me to sell it to him. I didn't want to start fighting with him. I thought it was better off to just keep peaceful relations, and I agree, but I didn't really mean it. Or, okay, we're going to see where there's a basis for this kind of a claim. Okay, and then the Gemara is going to have to distinguish between why it doesn't work here. But it does work in another place, which we're going to see. Could be also she was worried he was going to get angry at her, right? Who knows what could happen if he got angry with her? It could be even more than that, right? She's scared of him. Okay, as opposed to just wanting shalom bayit, which is one thing more from a positive perspective, but the other could be she's literally scared of her husband. And if she felt threatened by him, if she didn't sign and say, yes, I'm giving it to you, well, he would have been really angry, and who knows what could have happened. So it could be that. So either which way, that seems to be a claim. How do we know it's a claim? Because of a Mishnah. Milotna does not say in a Mishnah. Lakach min ha'isha, ha'ish v'chazar v'lakach min ha'isha mikcho batem. Here we're talking about a ketubah. A woman has things in her ketubah that basically the husband commits in death or divorce, he will give her property, okay, a certain amount of money, okay, which could be in property. And in fact, his property is liened to this. So let's say he has property that's liened to the ketubah. Okay, we're going to talk about in what cases exactly. Right now, we could think maybe we're talking about all land that the husband owned that theoretically is liened to the ketubah that was all owned at the time the ketubah was written. What if he wants to sell it? So if he sells it to someone now, she theoretically has rights to it. So like any lien property to a certain extent. Now, if somebody bought the land from the husband and then went and purchased it from the wife as well, some people think this means he actually paid her money, a small amount of money. Some people think he didn't pay her anything, which would mean if he paid her money, maybe this wouldn't work. No, only if he didn't pay her money. But some people think even if he paid her money, this would work. That what? She agreed to either take the money or at least agreed to just give up her rights and sign off on her rights, sign on the dotted line, whatever. She can claim, oh, I didn't really mean that. Mikol batel. This is batel. I only did it. Okay, now the Gemara is going to say, Alma amra labali. What reason could she have for claiming this isn't a good sale? Because she could say, I only did it to make my husband happy. Again, whatever that means. So why don't we use that same claim by us? Hachanami, likewise here, tema nachavua hasiti labali. Now I want to explain also another debate. There's a lot of debates here among the Rishonim. What exactly is batel here? Does that mean as soon as the person bought? Okay, so the Rashbam says, let me start with the other opinion. The Rashbam says what this means is that, let's say the husband sold the land and then he bought it from the wife, meaning he bought that in the event of death or divorce and the land theoretically should go to the woman, she already sold those rights. In other words, she was supposed to collect the ketubah. She's selling him the rights to that. So what it means is whoever bought it, the mekach is batel just means it's not completely canceled, but this purchaser buys the land right now. If the husband dies first, and then the land goes to the wife. And even though she either took money or didn't take money, again, if it's only didn't take money, then it might be different. If she actually got money, then it would be a different story and we'd say the sale is good. But either which way we interpret it, perhaps even if she got money, she could claim later, oh, I didn't mean to do that. I was only doing it because I was scared of my husband or I wanted to make him happy and I didn't really mean it. That's one interpretation. Some people go so far as to say, and that's the Rashbam, by the way, what I explained first. Some people go so far as to say, I think it's the Rimi Gash or Rabbeinu Hananel and maybe someone else, go so far as to say the complete not a sale at all. Immediately, it's not a sale, okay? Because this person never had rights to buy this, because really it was the woman's, or the woman had rights to it. And therefore, the sale is invalid from the beginning. They don't even have it till the husband, well, even if the wife dies first, it doesn't matter. Sale is invalid immediately. Okay, anyway, the question is, why does it work in our case where he could pull out a star and say, and it's again, assumption from our Mishnah, because he can't create a chazaka, but he could pull out a star, it seems, and say this land is mine, even though it was hers, and maybe she could claim, I just sold it to my husband because I wanted to make him happy. Whereas in the case of the ketubah and the lien of the ketubah, the lien property of the ketubah, the sale is not valid. And we use this claim of, I just did it to make my husband happy. So we're only going to start the answer today. We're not really going to understand it yet. But in answering it, they say, wait, you're quoting a Mishnah, but that Mishnah already had an explanation on it. Ha'itmar la was said about that Mishnah. Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna lo nitzcha ela ba'otan shalosh sadot. That was only said about particular 3 fields. Okay, and the 3 fields are, we'll explain them and then we'll stop. Chaj katav la b'ktubata. One was a field that he promised her in the ketubah. It's not just he said, normal ketubahs say, all my property is lien. It wasn't all my property is lien. If he sells any of his property, that's not an issue. She can't say, oh, I signed off on it because I was just doing nachar ruach. No, because he had other land. But if he said in the ketubah, I'm giving you this land, and he wrote it down in the ketubah, or I'm going with the Rashbam's interpretation of these 3 cases. There's a bunch of other interpretations. Starting now, just the next stop. He said, okay, by the way, that's called an apotiki, where you're going to collect it from this land, and he wrote that in the ketubah. The second is, he said, you can collect it from this land, but he only told her that orally, he didn't write it in the ketubah. And the third is, this is nichset son barza, which is the property she brings in. She brought in a field as part of her dowry. It was written down in the ketubah. He commits to give back the land, but at the value it was at the time of the wedding. If it was land that was hers to begin with, and he sold it, and she agreed, she could say nachar ruach. But only in those 3 cases, and we're going to continue on and explain the answer more in tomorrow's talk. So what will we do today? We started with the moda'ah and the amanah, and basically tried to say, why did the moda'ah work? Didn't Rav Nachman say it doesn't? We distinguish between oral moda'ah and written, signed moda'ah, the witnesses sign on it, because shtar is enough to override shtar, but oral is not enough to override oral. We also described about a shtar amanah. And then we got to Marbar of Ashi, who disagreed and thought actually a moda'ah would work even orally. It's only the amanah, which is not allowed to be done, and therefore we don't believe the witnesses that they would incriminate themselves. That's a different story, that they won't be believed. But we do accept oral testimony to override a shtar in general, unless we have reason not to believe the oral testimony. Then we did about this case in the Mishnah, which we said isn't that obvious, it's payroll. Of course, he can't claim rights. He has rights to the payroll, to which we said it must be a case where he gave up his rights. We had to then say, oh, well, it must have been he gave up his rights while they were betrothed, because once they were married, they were already his. He would have to do something more serious to get rid of his rights. Just saying, I don't want to have anything to do with it isn't a valid statement. And then we got into, other cases where you could just say, I don't want to have anything to do with this, and it would work if, right, it's basically not opting into something before making the arrangement beforehand, and only if it's takana chachamim, but not something you're supposed to get by Torah law. And then we just had this last inference, which is, well, you can't create a chazaka, but you could if you had a document proving you were the owner, that would work. And then we said, but why can't she claim nachat ruach hasiti lebali, just like it works in a different Mishnah with her k'tuba money? And then we're in the middle of that, and we'll start back with that in the next class. As I said, wishing everyone a tzom kal, or if you already finished your fast, hope it was a good fast, and maybe zocheh to complete geula.